impact on a material universe to create it.
If you believe that God created the universe, then logically you've got to ask the question, who created God? And then you have to ask, who created the God that created the God that created the God that created God that created God, and so on ad infinitum. Well, let's analyze it for a moment. Who created God? If you ask that question, it shows you've immediately categorized God as created. So you're talking about a created God. This question is extremely interesting because it's an illustration of a question that already rules out the explanation that's most likely to be true. Because the Christian claim is that God wasn't created.
The world, whatever you believe, if you grant that you can't get something from nothing, right? You can't get something from nothing. It can't be the case if you accept, as I think everybody does, that this option is ruled out. Once upon a time, there was absolutely nothing, and then all of a sudden, there was everything, or anything. You can't get anything from nothing. You know, that just goes against all logic. So, if you believe that you can't get something from nothing, and you grant that there is now something, which I'm hoping you do since I'm talking to you and I'm a something and so are you, then there must have always been a something. Everyone has to believe that something has been forever. Otherwise, we'd still have nothing. So it's a question of what is the something that has been around forever? Now, here's the thing. Everything we know about the physical world tells us that it's not a good candidate for something that has been around forever. Especially since the 30s of the last century, with the acceptance of the Big Bang Theory, which is pretty much uniform now, which is telling us that this universe, as we now know it, is a one-way show. It's a one-time, one-way show. Everything indicates that energy is being used up, as I mentioned earlier. Second law of thermodynamics is very well established. The suns are running out of energy. We now know that the outer rim of the universe, the farther out we go, the faster it's expanding. So the expansion seems to be speeding up. And we have no way of explaining that. Energy is being used, and everything we know about it is that it's used up. So the physical world, physical reality, isn't a good candidate for the something that must have always been for there to be anything. So whatever there was that is the cause of what is, must be quite different than what is. Because what is, by definition, as far as we know it, can't always have been. And I submit to you that all contingent reality, which is simply reality that could be otherwise, this chair, you, me, virtually everything you're seeing here, it came into being, it goes out of being, and it's forever on the precipice of non-being. It's not solid. It disappears in time. That all of those things don't explain themselves. None of this explains themselves. And the totality of contingent things don't explain themselves. They're like rope. Everything depends on everything else. It's like dominoes. And at some point, you have to suppose that there must be something that's very much unlike what we're trying to explain what we're in the process of.
So if God was uncreated, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He already was. So the central Christian claim is, and in Judaism and Islam, of course, equally, is that God is eternal. So the question, by definition, doesn't even apply to him. The only way you can get anything out of it, then, in the negative sense, is to assume that everything is in the category of the created, but that's just begging the original question. And the Greeks were interested in it, and that's why John's Gospel starts with those words. In the beginning, the Word already was, and then it says, all things came to be through him. The Greeks were interested in the question of two categories, the things that came to be, the created things, and the things that already were. And the question resolves down to this: is there a thing or a being that never came to be? And that is the Christian claim, and he's called God. You say that who created God is a legitimate question. I don't think it is, but let me assume now that it is. You believe that the universe created you. So I beg leave now to ask you, using your own question, who created your creator? I'm waiting still for the answer. I was talking to about 1,000 scientists, and a man came up to me afterwards, a physicist, and he said, it was very interesting, all that talk about God, but he said, do you know, I detect you're a Christian. As a Christian, you're obliged to believe that God is a triunity, that Jesus was God and man. And he said, now, come on, you're a mathematician at Oxford, this is absurd. Can you explain it to me? Well, I said, can I ask you a question first? He said, sure. So I said, tell me, what is consciousness? And he thought for a second, and then he said, I don't know. I said, that's okay, let me try an easier one. What is energy? Well, he said, I'm a physicist, I can measure energy, I can use it. I said, you know, that's not my question. What is it? He said, I don't know. Oh, I said, that's very interesting. You don't know. Tell me, I said, do you believe in consciousness? Yes, he said. Do you believe in energy? Yes, he said. So I said, you believe in these two things and you don't know what they are. I said, should I write you off as an intellectual? And he said, please don't. And I said, but that's exactly what you were going to do with me 5 minutes ago. Now I said, if you don't know what energy is, and nobody does, if you don't know what energy is, don't be surprised if energy, light, gravity, and consciousness are a mystery. Don't be surprised if you're going to get an element of this in God. You're bound to get it.
Question, who created God? Well, this is not at all difficult to answer. A timeless, eternal being cannot have a cause. As Keith Ward points out in his book, God, Chance, and Necessity, if one asks what caused God, the answer is that nothing could bring into being a reality which wholly transcends space-time and which is self-existent. To fail to grasp such an idea is to fail to grasp what God is. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Something cannot come into being out of nothing. But if something is eternal and timeless, then it doesn't fall under that first premise. It doesn't need a cause. Even atheists like Daniel Dennett recognize that if eternal verities exist, like numbers or mathematical objects, they don't need a cause because they never come into being. They don't begin to exist. And the concept of God is the concept of an eternal, self-existent, necessary being, and therefore the answer is simply that God is uncaused. He is self-existent.
Our definition of God is the uncreated creator of the universe. So to ask the question, who created the uncreated creator, is kind of like asking, what sound does silence make? Or, do you see what I'm saying? There's a definition of silence that precludes us from asking the question. And that is really what we're doing here when we ask the question, who created the uncreated creator of the universe? Do we as Christians have a problem in grounding our beliefs in a God that is uncreated? Does the atheist have a better answer for this? Well, I'll tell you, as a non-believer, and I was a non-believer until I was 35, I also believed in an uncreated creator. Maybe it was a multiverse generator. Maybe it was some quantum environment in which our universe emerged spontaneously. Regardless of what it was that caused the universe, as an atheist, I would have told you that that thing was uncreated. So it turns out everyone believes there's an uncreated creator.
So which I want you to fill in the story of the rest of the beginning of the universe.